I'm Dr. Samantha Rush. I am the founder of Marvellous Women CAANZ and the host of this great podcast. On this episode, we are talking to someone who's really focused on having an impact in a very special community. And I'm really excited to have this conversation talking to her about the journey of getting to the point where she can now see the impact that she's starting to make. I hope that you really enjoy this chat. Welcome to Marvellous Women, the podcast. On this episode, we have the fabulous Chipo Wekare. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Dr. Samantha. Good to be here.
Thank you. So tell us, who are you?
My name is Chipo. I am a mother, a wife, a chartered accountant, and most recently, a philanthropist.
Okay. And tell me about, I want to know about all of those in a little bit more detail, but you picked the order of those for a reason. So tell us a little bit more about kind of that hierarchy for you.
Right. I guess it's just the order in which things happened for me. I had my son when I was pretty young. I was 19 when I got pregnant, 20 when I had him, and then got married after that, and then pursued my tertiary education, which I'd put on hold to have my baby, and became a chartered accountant. And then most recently started a charity to help children with type 1 diabetes in Zimbabwe. So now a philanthropist.
Wow. I need to know more about that. And, full disclosure, I do obviously know about that because I was at your Marvellous event just a few weeks ago. But I do want to understand a little bit more about, the story that you had your son, you put your education kind of on hold and then you went back. Like how was it going through tertiary education? How old was your son when you did that? And that must have just been incredibly hard.
It was. I mean, it started off quite ironically. This is the story I don't often share, but I was actually having a gap year from university before coming to university. And yeah, that's when I found myself pregnant. And so basically that gap year became 2. And then as soon as my son was born, I then started my Bachelor of Commerce at Griffith University.
Yeah. And so how did you kind of balance baby and, because I think that, and I think back to my own undergrad, it's kind of like a baby. Like, you've got to give it so much time and attention, and you kind of get a little bit sick of it sometimes. Like, how did you juggle those two things?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't easy. I had a pretty solid support system. My parents were hands-on grandparents, so they were extremely helpful. And for them, their priority was for me to always finish my university degree. So they went well out of their way to make things easy for me. And my husband, Bryn, was also extremely supportive. He was studying as well at the same time. And I think things really got a little bit difficult when I then did my postgraduate diploma, my chartered accounting. That was pretty hard, but as with difficult things, I guess you just find a way to cope and you keep going. So yeah, did it and graduated, got there in the end.
And was the graduate diploma hard because you'd already spent so long kind of doing that, and then it was just like you kind of were finished but you weren't finished, or was there something else that kind of added into the mix that made it harder?
There were a few factors. I think the biggest is probably the fact that chartered accounting, the graduate diploma, is extremely hard. It's probably one of the most difficult things I've done in my life, and I've done a few difficult things. But that's part of the challenge, I guess, with the qualification. Everybody knows it's not supposed to be easily attained. So you go into it expecting some turmoil. But then at that point, my son was newly diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. So we were also trying to learn how to deal with that and how to manage that. And as with getting the CA qualification, most of the time you do it while you're full-time employed. So yeah, there were a few spicy little little things going on at the same time, but you just adapt and you keep moving.
That sounds like a bit more than a spicy period. That's kind of like a Tinderloo. That's like the hottest of hot curries kind of experience that you just talked about, not only having a young son doing what is a very, very difficult qualification, but then illness as well, and working full time, all thrown together. I'd love to hear, Chipo, you mentioned that you kind of adapt and you go along the way. What were the key adaptations or mindset shifts or time scheduling shifts, or like how did you deal with that? Because with those stacking of things, like you need to find a way to keep going.
Yeah, that's right. And see, I don't think I've actually spent a lot of time thinking back to how I managed to get through that period. I do know my sleep did suffer a little bit. Sleep wasn't a priority at that point in time, and I was young enough to get away with that. Now, if I tried to do that now, I'd have palpitations. I'd be all over the place. But the other thing is, I've always had like words of affirmation that I use. And I think people have their own things that they tell themselves to get through situations. I still to this day, whenever I'm faced with a difficult situation, I tell myself I can do hard things. So yeah, that's just one of the few things I've used all throughout my adult journey, my adulthood.
Yeah, I think that's really important to tell yourself, because you've done hard things, you can do hard things again. And I know that you've just come off the back of organizing a massive gala event. Did you use that mantra during any of those preparations?
Not quite with the gala. I think I've used it because I'm training for a half marathon in July, as you
Oh
know.
gosh.
Yes. So as I'm training and increasing my kilometers as part of my training process, I've had to use that quite a bit. Yeah.
So the I can do hard things mantra you use for workload things, for mental things, for physical things. It's like a wild mantra, if you will, like the wild card version of a mantra.
Yeah, I think just anytime something needs a little bit more effort and yeah, effort.
Yeah.
I would reach into the bag of, of positivity and go for that one because I mean anybody, we can all do hard things and sometimes that self-doubt creeps in. But I can do hard things is a very, very good reminder to keep pushing on.
What else is in your bag of positivity? I'm very interested.
No, that's pretty much it. I think that's my go-to. Potentially in the past, I might have used other sayings to get through things, but most of the times I'm faced with a tough situation, I will always remind myself I can do hard things.
So tell us more about Chipo the philanthropist and what your organization does, what it's about, and what you're hoping to achieve.
Yes, so that's a pretty new title for me, Chipo the philanthropist. Um, but it goes back to 2008 when my son was 2 years old and he was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. This actually happened over in Zimbabwe, and it was quite the ordeal for him to actually get a correct diagnosis. It took a number of days for the medical teams to be able to do that. And with a condition like type 1 diabetes, time is quite critical, because the longer you go without a diagnosis and treatment, the worse off your condition becomes, to the point where potentially you could end up comatose, and basically death is a possibility for delayed diagnosis. So he was close to a very dangerous situation by the time we finally got his diagnosis. And we were actually going through the private health system at that point, and it was still ridiculously difficult to get a diagnosis. And that whole ordeal stuck with me. It's something I've never forgotten. And I oftentimes sat there and thought to myself, with all the resources that we had available to us, the process was still ridiculously difficult and dangerous. What about people that don't have access, the same level of access we have? So that motivated me to create a charity that seeks to help children with type 1 diabetes in Zimbabwe.
Now, tell me about the kind of process of putting the charity together, because I remember talking to you when you were doing a subject in your MBA, and you were kind of, going through a bit of a process of trying to understand what might that look like. At what point did you realize I could actually do this?
It was something that I knew I would end up doing. And as I was going through my MBA at UQ, I was given the option for my capstone to either do an industry capstone or the entrepreneurial capstone. And because I was somebody that just didn't like to talk about, personal things or very intimate and meaningful things to myself, I thought I would struggle with the process of explaining to the cohort, basically my classmates, my peers, about my personal ambitions to help children with type 1 diabetes. But after thinking about the investment I'd made into my MBA and how I really wanted something very well structured and very well set up, I decided to go for it, to be vulnerable, to open up and give this charity the best chance possible. So I worked on it as my capstone, and yeah, we haven't looked back since.
No, and I think that's just incredible. I think even when there's something that we think to ourselves, I am going to do this at some point in my life, when you're at the point and you realize, actually, I can do this and I can do it now. Like, that's incredibly, what's the word I'm looking for? Rewarding, enriching. How does it feel for you, kind of being a couple of years on? And do you kind of look back and go, wow, I've come so far? Or are you a little bit more like me and you go, what's next? That's nice, what's next, as opposed to, good on me. I've done hard things.
I feel like there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. I feel like we haven't quite reached the level of impact into the Zimbabwean community that we would feel comfortable with. The healthcare system in Zimbabwe is not great. So there are a lot of children affected by type 1 diabetes that have a lot of needs. And we are just barely even scratching the surface when it comes to that. So we're still at a point of trying to figure out how to prioritize our efforts and what to do next. And because we're a brand new charity, our resources are pretty limited. So we definitely have to go through a process of prioritizing the highest impact work that we could allocate our resources to at the moment.
Yeah. And how are you, based on what you've just said, there is so much need. How do you figure out what are the things that can have the biggest impact? Like, what's your criteria when you're looking for the biggest impact? When I evaluate all these things, is this?
So we have two things that we look at. The first is we've set ourselves up to work with credible partners on the ground. We've partnered with long-standing community partners that have been there, that know their beneficiaries in the community. So we trust them to actually help us find the most vulnerable, the most, the children that would benefit the most from our programs. And so that's how we do it, through partnerships and also just by targeting the most vulnerable in the communities.
Mm. I think there's definitely something in that for any kind of decision making that we have to make. That felt very Austin Powers decision making to make. Is you can't do it alone, or you can do it alone, but it's going to take you longer, and maybe you'll go somewhere that might not be the best place. So how can you use the expertise of the people around you to help you be able to go faster and go further?
Yes, that's exactly it. I think working with partners that are physically on the ground and have been on the ground for many, many years, that are very closely tied to the members of the community. It just helps us make sure that we're not wasting our resources doing marketing and trying to identify these people when there is somebody on the ground that has already identified these people for us. So yeah, it's been very, very rewarding to just be able to hit the ground running instead of having to put the legwork into identifying the most vulnerable people. And sometimes through that process, you wouldn't even identify them. You'd identify the people that come forward, or the people that have been reached through word of mouth, through their different networks, but not everybody that really, really needs the services.
Yeah. So what's next for the organization? What's the next big impact event that you're having?
So we're working on our annual children's camp. This would be our second year. We partnered last year with two really, really well-established charities in Zimbabwe, and worked on a camp last year, which was attended by about 69 children and their family members, their guardians for those under 12. We're working on a bigger camp this year. And yeah, the goal is to give these children with type 1 diabetes a chance to meet other children with type 1 diabetes, so they feel that they're not alone, provide them a safe space where they can talk about what their challenges are, provide them access to mental health services, because that's a really big part of it. When you're dealing with a chronic condition like type 1 diabetes, you do need that support. And also just to give the parents a bit of a break, because sometimes it gets overwhelming. So if mom and dad can talk to another set of parents that are going through the exact same thing, we think it would be really, really helpful for them as well.
Well, I think you've been in that situation, right? So you know exactly how beneficial it can be to talk to other people, maybe who are, they might be a couple of months ahead of you on the journey. They might be able to give you some clarity, or on the other side, there's someone you talk to who maybe you're a couple of months ahead of them, and you can give them some peace or some information. And so I think that community, that fellowship is always really important.
Yes, it really is.
So Chipo, you've made a lot of pretty big decisions in your life from the short, teeny tiny snippet of your story that we've heard. What for you has been the most important decision that you've made when you look back now, and how did you do it?
That's a very good question.
Thank you.
I think a couple, probably, in terms of just setting myself up on the path that I've ended up on. Becoming a chartered accountant was probably one key decision. I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be an accountant because I had an uncle, my dad's little brother, who was a chartered accountant. And one day I just looked at him and I said, I want to do what you do. And so I knew all along that's what I wanted to do. And the second thing was doing my MBA. It was, yeah, I think I knew as well that I would end up doing an MBA, but the value I ended up getting through that process and, you know, the network that I've built from that, the learnings, the support, and basically at the end of it, the charity that I've managed to build is all really traces back to the work that I did during my MBA.
Now, for a slightly different question, Chipo, if you looked up the words marvelous woman in the dictionary, whose face would you see and why?
Oh, you're full of really, really curly questions today. That's another good one. Um, I probably would see my grandmother, my maternal grandmother. Yeah, she's a pretty remarkable woman, marvelous woman.
Can you tell us a little bit more about her?
Yes. So this is my mother's mother, and she was widowed at a very young age. My grandfather was a truck driver and had an accident at work one day, just never came back. And I guess in Zimbabwe, which is a very patriarchal society, her husband's family wanted her to they have this thing where one of the brothers, the husband's brothers, assumes responsibility over the widow and her children, but basically becomes another wife. So yeah, she decided that wasn't for her, and she packed up her things and left and went back to her father's house. And yeah, she had two daughters, my mom and my aunt, raised them through a lot of difficulties and struggles and hardship. But yeah, she's just a marvelous woman. She's very cool, calm, and collected. She thinks before she speaks. She's very articulate. She's in her 90s now, and she's incredible, an incredible woman, amazing role model for me.
I think there's a lot of similarity that I see in the story that you've just told about your grandmother and you know, that whole idea that you can really do anything that you put your mind to. And I really love that. It's been such an inspiring story to hear. The really great work that you're doing, Chipo, which has all come from your heart and wanting to help other people. So I do want to just ask one very, very last question. Tell us the name of the charity and where people might be able to read more about it.
Yes, but before I do, I'd love to hear who you would say would be a marvelous woman for you.
Oh, wow. No one asks me these questions. Chippo, I ask these questions. People don't. People don't. Oh, look, I've got so many. As you know, I have the deck of Marvellous Women cards, which is a deck of 52 women who I think are marvelous and things about their life. And I think one of them who really stood out to me is a lady who was a mountain climber. She was a Japanese lady, and she copped a lot of what's the word? She copped a lot of flack. So back in the day, so sort of around the 50s, 60s, she was climbing. I think that she's probably not the only one anymore, but she was the first woman to climb all 7 peaks. And there were things like men wouldn't climb with her. They would get off the mountain and wait for her to leave so that they could climb woman free, which is really not very nice because we're all just doing our thing. I'm just flicking through so that I can show you her card and give you the points on her card. It's going to be right at the last one. Found her.
Oh, wow.
You can't really see it very well. This is
I can, yeah.
And one of the things that she said that really, I think, fits in with the stories that you've told today is she said, Everest is only a mountain.
Wow.
It's just a mountain.
Yeah.
Commit to do what you want, regardless of what others say. And willpower rises from your heart. So I think she fits the conversation that we've had today perfectly. As a marvelous woman, you know, she created a women's climbing association and really paved the way, as it were, for female mountain climbers. So I think she's a marvelous woman.
Yeah, wow. And how profound. It's just a mountain. Yeah.
So for you, you know, I can do hard things.
Yes.
It's just a mountain. There's
A
something in
big
that for all
mountain.
of us, isn't there? It's a big mountain. It's a big mountain. Lots of people die on all the time, but it's just a mountain.
It's just a mountain.
I love that. Chipo, thank you so much for being on the podcast, and thank you for asking me a question. That was really fantastic. I enjoyed that.
It's all right. Thanks for answering. And yeah, I'll answer your question now.
Please.
You can find us at liligracefoundation.com, Lili Grace Foundation, one word, .com. And yeah, please subscribe to our newsletters so you can keep track of what we've got going on. We're super, super excited about the camp. We're working hard to deliver something that these children can build a core memory from. And just, yeah, give them a little bit of love. It's such a debilitating condition, type 1 diabetes. You get no breaks. You're on it 24/7. It's life and death stuff. And then if you add on additional burdens like lack of access to medication, no mental health support, it can get pretty bleak. So if we can give them 4 days where they don't have a care in the world, I think it will go a long way for them.
And as you said, you know, meeting and hanging out with other people who have the same thing, and then everyone can support each other, and those relationships can go on.
Yes, exactly.
I love that. Chipo, you can do hard things. You have done hard things, and I love your bag of positivity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Samantha. It's been nice chatting with you.
Thank you for being on the podcast. Thank you so much, Chipo, for sharing your story. It is super inspiring to see somebody so focused on really making a difference. And not only that, but also, you know, your whole philosophy and your mantra, I can do hard things. And I really love that idea of having a bag of positivity. I need to get one of these myself. What will I put in my bag of positivity? What would you put in your bag of positivity? Until next time, stay marvelous.